Great morning, Gabby. How are you?
I'm fantastic, Paul. How are you?
I am outstanding. Thank you for asking.
Anytime.
So this is the Impact Room, episode 3, and our topic of discussion is going to be what teens struggle with as far as mental health. In your opinion, what do you believe that is one of the most important things that some of the teens that we're serving in the schools? What do you feel like is one of the main focuses that they're struggling with today?
I think that a lot of what we see is just the big two, depression and anxiety. So many of them struggle with like basic needs, like getting up and going to school in the morning, coming home. Most of them just want to come home and like go to sleep and not really want to deal with like what they went through throughout the day. And I can relate because I was also somebody that has struggled with that for a very, very, very long time. And I feel like as time goes on, like these kids have like the weight of the world on their shoulders, because not only are they in high school going through puberty, going through relationships, friendships, family relationships, which are all kind of like their own struggles in and of themselves. But I think that it's just so much harder to be a kid, especially with the like onset of social media, which has made everything so much more complicated.
It really has, yeah.
With all like if in order for you to be beautiful, you have to look like this. And I think that's what a lot of like the young girls struggle with. Because even when I was in high school, I didn't have like the social media that exists today.
Right.
And so it's really hard to watch them constantly compare themselves, especially like I have a 15-year-old sister, and I've had conversations with her and just her telling me how much she's struggling. And I just remember feeling like that. And it's hard to offer support to teenagers, because they don't think that I'm cool, even though I'm only like 4 years older than them.
I know. You're a lot closer than I am.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, you touched on some things. Definitely in school, we hear these young people reaching out. They seem overwhelmed because a lot of the times it's the first time they're facing some of these challenges, and they're not quite sure what to do with them. So, based on your experience and what you've seen, and your past, if you feel like talking about that, what was one of the hardest ones when you were coming up through middle school, pre-teen kind of thing, or a young teen? What was one of the things that you struggled with or saw other people struggling with?
Everything.
Got it.
Like when I was a middle, like when I think the earliest that I remember struggling with mental health was like 5th, 6th grade.
Okay.
So I was young,
right?
Like very, very young, like 10, 11 years old. And I remember thinking that I was crazy. And I remember being scared to tell anybody, because I was like, oh my God, they're going to think that I'm crazy. Like they're going to try to like send me away, which is not what happened. But I just remember being so scared. And when I finally did tell somebody, it was exactly what I thought it was going to be. And they made me feel crazy. They made me feel like I was like not normal. And so I remember thinking in my head, like, oh, I'm never going to tell anybody else ever again.
Yeah.
But the big thing for me was just the depression aspect of it. I was extremely depressed. And did I know that I was depressed? No. But like looking back at it now as like a 21-year-old, I can see and identify those feelings.
Right.
But I don't think that I really identified what I was going through until like high school age, like 9th, 10th grade.
Okay.
Because I remember like reconnecting with one of my best friends and her kind of explaining what she was going through and just being like, wow, like I'm not alone. Like I'm not the only person that's going through this, and feeling very connected to her and like connected to the other people that I knew were going through that. But still, like I had no idea what to do with that information. I had no idea how to like tell my mom. I had no idea how to like talk to somebody or how to find somebody that I could like really talk to. And so I got in a lot of trouble when I was in high school because I didn't know how to like deal with those feelings. And so I took them out on everybody else. I had a dad that wasn't around, who was in active addiction for a very long time. And so I didn't have that like positive role model, like the positive male role model in my life.
Right.
And so I was just angry all the time. And as I got older, like the anxiety part of it only got worse. Even now, it's something that I very much struggle with. And I think that COVID also made that really awful because I was like stuck in the house. And then I got so used to being stuck in the house that I was like, oh my God, I'm becoming like agoraphobic. And I still feel that way sometimes. But you know, it wasn't until I lost my best friend when I was 17. He passed away. And I feel like that was really like, as awful as that was to go through as a 17-year-old, I feel like that was when I really started to like worry about myself and like kind of start taking care of myself. It took like a year of like grieving him and like figuring out what I wanted to do, because for the 6 months after he passed away, I didn't want to be alive. Like I struggled very much. I had to like drop out of college, even though I don't even really know if you can consider it dropping out. I was there for like a week, maybe.
Do you feel like, sorry, I'm going to cut you off, but do you feel like there was anybody on the outside watching you that had an idea you were struggling with?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So my mom very much, I think, knew, but she had no idea how to help me.
Okay.
Because how do you? Like, I remember like telling her, so I remember like being with his family, and I love his family. Like they're so nice. They're so good to me. And I remember being with his family and like sitting at the end of the table and just being like, wow, I don't want to be here. Like not just at his family's, but like be here in general. I don't want to be alive. And so I remember going home and like my best friend had invited me over, and I was like, I don't know that if I leave the house, I'm going to like make it to her house. Like I think I'm going to do something really dumb.
Right.
And so I went inside of my mom's room, and, you know, I told her what was going on. And I think that she just was so scared because her 17-year-old daughter was on the couch behind her telling her that she wanted to kill herself.
Yeah.
And so I think she was really scared and really didn't know what to do with that information. And so we just did the best that we could, and we took it like one very slow baby step at a time. And, you know, I ended up finding a therapist, and me and my mom, I think, got very, very close after that. Not that we weren't close before,
Right,
but I think losing him and like losing my dad all in the kind of like span of 2 years made us very, very close. And so even just having like that closeness, like being best friends with my mom, like that relationship changed my life.
Right.
So like having her and just having that like support really, really gave me something that I had never had before. Because I was very much a teenager that hated everybody and didn't want to be around anybody because I couldn't process my feelings. And so having her and like having my sisters and having like my best friend, like that really changed everything for me. And I look back on it now. Like I look back on when I lost him, and I'm just like, wow, I can't believe that I was ever like in a position where I really genuinely was ready to like take my own life. Yeah. Like ready, felt like I had nothing to live for. And I think that depression will do that to you, right? Because even back then I had so much to live for. Like I had so much to live for. My little brother was 4 years old. Like my sister was 11 years old. I had so much to live for, but like that depression was like, no, you have nothing. You have nothing and you have no one.
Was that a gradual thing, or did it hit you all at once? I mean, I know you said you were struggling before, but the feeling of it, was it like over the years it just started to snowball, and then
I think that it was there the whole time, but I don't think that it really hit me until like I graduated high school and he passed away.
Okay.
Because then I feel like it was very much like he's gone, and like I didn't know how to exist in a world where he didn't exist because he was my best friend. And so after he passed away, I was very much just like, okay, I have nothing left. I have nobody. And obviously that wasn't true, but like depression will do that to you. It will lie to you. And it will make you believe that what you're thinking is fact, and it's not. So like even now, like I have so many things to live for. Like I have so much to live for. But even now, like I'm never going to be like cured. Like those thoughts are never just going to go away.
Right.
But now that I have kind of like taken care of myself and I've healed and I have a therapist and I take care of myself and I have like these healthy coping mechanisms, even when I have those thoughts, even though they're rare, I can sit back and be like, hey, that's not true. Like I have so much to live for. And I can kind of like, it's going to sound a little silly, but like I can argue with my head and be like, hey, I don't want to think about that.
Right.
Like that's not how we're going to live our lives, which is not easy.
Right.
But
so first of all, I give you all the props in the world for the courage to actually reach out and let somebody know you're having these.
It was
these
not
thoughts.
easy.
Yeah, I bet it wasn't.
Let the record show.
Yeah, but that just says a lot about you, how strong you are, right? And the courage that it took to do that. So we've been in the schools. You've been in the schools. You know, we've seen close to 1,200 students last year, and you know, many more this year. Some of the things that you hear, and you can feel free, you know, to elaborate on some of the other things that we hear about the students are struggling with, and it might be their community part of it. It might be their, you know, a lot of their mental health is that was brought on by their surroundings. Can you talk about some of that stuff you've heard, or a couple of the things that have impacted you, the stories, some of the students?
I think that the most impactful story that I've heard, and obviously I'm not going to give away too information because it's not my story to tell.
Right.
But basically there was a girl who was younger, like 14 or 15, and she was going through exactly what I went through.
Mm-hmm.
And of course that's always going to hit a little bit harder than other stories.
Right.
So she had a dad that was in addiction that she hadn't seen in a very long time. And I remember her coming to me and just being like, she came to me and she was like, I don't know why he doesn't want me. And I just remember being like, oh my gosh. Mm-hmm. And like looking at her and remembering what that felt like. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know how to give her like the support as somebody who's not going to see her on like a daily basis.
Right.
But I remember just looking at her and being like, listen, it's not that like he doesn't want you. Like he's just very sick. And she was like, yeah, but it doesn't feel that way. And I was like, I know. But like, I tried to think of like all the things that I would have wanted to hear as like a 14, 15-year-old.
Right.
And I said those to her, and like, who knows if that did anything. Like she might've went home and been like, oh, nothing done. I don't care.
Then
or she might have went home and been like, wow, you know, I'm going to think about that. But like, I just remember looking at her and being like, I really hope that she makes it out of this.
Yeah.
Because it's not easy. And I think that a lot of the times we worry about like adult mental health, but like these kids are our future adults. Like these are the future generations that are going to be 21 in 4 years. So like, I think it's just so important to like cater to them. And I also think it's important to talk to like our young boys. Mm-hmm. Like these boys very much live in like this state of like, I can't show you my emotions. Yes. I can't cry. If I cry, that means that like I'm weak. Mm-hmm. And that breaks my heart because it's not true. Mm-hmm. And you know, a lot of people think that like we're past that and like that people don't think that anymore, but they very much do.
Sure.
And on social media, it's so bad. All they hear is that they can't show their emotions. And if they cry, they're weak. Or if they do anything, or if they talk about their feelings, they're not real men. Mm-hmm. And that is not true.
Yeah, it's not the case.
But like, you can't see a 15-year-old boy and tell him one time, hey, like you can show your emotions, like you can cry and you can be upset, because that's one person telling them versus the hundreds of people that are telling him that he can't show his feelings.
Sure. And
so I think it's just really important for like us as a society to start taking care of like these young kids because they're so scared.
Yeah, I think, well, from what I've seen, there's almost too much information out there. And from my generation, it has totally changed. Your generation and the one, I guess, I don't know if you're still considered the youngest generation out there, but you guys are way more open to the mental health aspect of it. As far as being, you know, getting treatment and speaking up. My day, we didn't do that at all. people just suffered or start to get addicted to certain substances to be able to deal with that stuff. But I feel like nowadays it's being more, it's okay to talk about more now, but it's still not enough. It's still not enough. So one of the things that I know you said you leaned on your family. Say somebody doesn't have that family. What would be another aspect? Where could they go to seek out resources or be able to deal with it internally? What would you suggest, or what have you heard that they could do?
So I think that with the young kids, they hate going to school. Mm-hmm. Most of them.
Right.
My sister loves school, but it's a little weird. But like most of these kids hate going to school. But I think that like the resources that schools have are so important. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that they are used because the kids hate school.
Okay.
So like when I was in high school, I had a guidance counselor, and I saw her like maybe once every few like weeks, mm-hmm. but like she changed my life. Like I still think about her like every now and then. So like having her when I felt like I didn't have my family, even though I did,
right.
Like having her just so I could just like go see her on like a bad day was very important. So like even if they don't want to see their school guidance counselor, or they can walk right into like the guidance counselor's office or even just like the main office and just be like, hey,
yeah,
I need this, this, and this. I know that you guys have those resources. Can you just like send them to me? But I think a lot of the kids are scared. I think they're scared of like retaliation, of like getting seen in the main office, sure. or like the guidance counselor calling their parents and be like, well, your daughter told me that mm-hmm. she's going to kill herself. Like,
yeah.
So I think that's a really, really hard thing to do. Because it's scary when you tell somebody that you think you can trust and then they break that trust, because then as a 14-year-old, you're never going to trust another person. Not never, but probably for a long time.
Yeah, it's a heck of a spot to be in, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you divulge that you're going to hurt yourself or have a plan to. But
because then they have to report.
Right.
But they don't understand that.
Right.
Like at 14 years old, I wouldn't have understood that.
Right.
So like I understand as like a 21-year-old that if a student comes to me and tells me they're going to hurt themselves, that I have to report that for their safety.
Correct.
But like that child, all they see is I trusted you and you broke my trust. Mm-hmm. Like you betrayed me.
Yeah. I mean, that's tough, but I'd rather them being mad at me and alive
absolutely.
Than not here, right?
Which sucks.
Yeah.
I wish there was more options, but
yeah. Some of the tools that you've implemented to deal with, say, your depression or your anxiety, what have you implemented to help you get through the day? I know you said you have more of a conversation now, and focusing on, the positives more than the negatives. But what other things have you done?
This is going to sound really silly, really goofy.
Well, whatever works.
But it's what I tell the students. Uh-huh. I just wake up and I get out of bed. And I think that is probably the most important thing that I do, mm-hmm. because 2 years ago, I would have laid in bed for 24 hours at a time.
Okay.
Didn't get up to eat or sleep. Didn't have a job. Wasn't going to school. Mm-hmm. And so I think that really the most important thing that I do is just I wake up and I just force myself to get out of bed, because I have things to get out of bed for. Right? Like I have a job that I love. I have friends that I love. I have a family that I love. And so like I just get out of bed and I wake up every day and I'm excited for what I'm going to do, even if I'm not actually excited about it. Mm-hmm. But like in my brain, I get to do these things. And so how can I just lay in bed when I have all of these beautiful things that I get to do every day that other people don't have the opportunity to do?
Right.
Which is something I really struggle with for a very long time. Like I was very much like a martyr. I was like, oh, I don't want to do any of these things. I don't care. The worst things are happening to me. Nobody's problems are bigger than mine. Mm-hmm. And so I just get out of bed every morning and I wake up and I'm excited and I'm grateful for all the things that I have. And even if I have the worst day ever, I go to sleep and I rest and I wake up and I do it all over again. Mm-hmm. So like, I just know in my head that even when I'm having an awful day, I have so much to look forward to. And another thing that I do is I set like goals for myself. Mm-hmm. So, and a goal could be like, I bought tickets to go to this event in 2 months. So I at least have to make it to that.
Right.
Or like my nephew's birthday is in May. I have to make it to that. You know what I mean? Like I do things and I like set up things and I make plans for the future because I know that I'm going to be here for them.
Right.
But I thought I was going to be dead by the time I turned 18.
Mm-hmm.
So when I turned 18 and I was alive and kept being alive, I very much had to be like, well, what do I do now? I didn't think I was going to make it this long. So like, what do I do now? And I still don't really know. Still trying to figure that out. But I just do things, right? I applied to go back to school in the fall,
Awesome.
which is a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is it terrifying? Absolutely. Do I feel like I want to throw up? Yes.
That's okay though.
But I did it, right?
Right.
I took my CPRS class and my school won't give me my diploma so I can take the exam, but I took the class and I loved it.
Right.
So I just do things that I love, and I have a dog who I get to wake up to every day, and she's right here all the time, just right here.
Yeah, I think, what I know is, you said it earlier, you're grateful for the things that you have,
Yes.
and you're allowed, or you're able to do these things. Because I believe, there's somebody somewhere in some part of the world that would do anything to switch positions with you. So that's a great outlook. I also heard that it's impossible to be depressed and grateful at the same time. So if we're focused on what we're thankful for, it's kind of hard to focus on the things we don't have. So that's great. That's a great tool to have,
Yeah, and I think that being on like the other side of it, right? So like, again, 2 years ago, I was in a much different place than I am right now. But being on this side of it is very weird, right? So even though I'm happy and I'm grateful, it still feels like funky sometimes. Like I still wake up and I'm like, oh, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I don't know how to be happy, if that makes sense. So like sometimes I feel like I almost self-sabotage and I'm like, you're not allowed to have good things. But again, that's the depression brain talking. So like I know in my heart that that's not true. But sometimes I have those days.
Sure.
Right? And I think that another really important thing that I do is that I try to live for all the people that I've lost. So I lost my dad and I lost my best friend and my great grandmother and a very close family friend. And so when they all passed away, my brain immediately went to, well, if they're not here, you shouldn't be either. Like, why was it them and not you kind of like thing? And I think that grief does that to you. I think that sometimes
it's part of it. I believe it's part of it. Yeah.
But I remember like seeing my therapist and she was like, she said, I don't even remember what she said now, but basically she was like, you need to take all of that and live for it. And I remember telling her, I was like, I don't know how to do that. And she was like, we're going to figure it out. And so, I just live for all of those people and I tell their stories any chance that I get, because if they could, they would be here. And so I want to keep them alive for as long as people will let me. Eventually people will tell me to stop talking. But, for as long as I can, I'm going to keep talking. So.
Absolutely. So some of the things that you've seen or know about as far as what some of the teenagers are doing in order to have this kind of release or to deal with whatever they're dealing. What would you say some of the things that you've seen or heard that they're dealing with? How are they releasing it in an unhealthy way?
So a lot of them are participating in self-harm.
Okay.
Which is something that I have experience in.
Okay.
But I think that's really the biggest thing. Some of them, they get very angry. And they take it out on like their family and their friends, which is also something that I have done. But again, I think that, and I was just telling somebody this the other day, I think the self-harm aspect of it, I felt like I had no control over everything or over anything.
Okay.
And so by participating in self-harm, I had control over one thing, and it was my body. Like I have control over this pain that I'm feeling because I'm doing it to myself, even though I have no control over anything else that's happening to me.
Okay.
And so at the end of the day, all that was me being scared and not having control and trying to figure out like how to cope with that. And so I see it now, and sometimes they don't even have to tell me they're doing it. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like I got it.
Right.
But again, there's really nothing that you can say to them that's going to help them, right? Like you can talk to them, you can tell them that you're there if they ever want to talk. But at the end of the day, like these kids, they need like persistent care and help.
Right.
And I wish that I could be a therapist and help every single kid that I see, but I think that I would probably die doing that because there's just so many kids out here that need help. So I think the best thing that we can do, like I can do as somebody that works with these kids, is just check up constantly. So like every time I see them, I'm like, hey, how are you doing? Like, what's going on? Like, how's your family? And and like set them up with resources. So like if they're in like the new, like, or if they're in this area, I'm like, I have this, and this, and it's free, and they will talk to you, and they'll give you a counselor, and they'll set you up, and they'll make sure you're okay. And maybe they take the resources, and maybe they don't.
Right.
But then at least I gave them that like opportunity.
Right.
And, you know, I've had both sides. I've had kids that be like, thank you. Like, I really need this. And other kids being like, I don't have a problem with that. I don't know what you're talking about.
Sure.
But just offering them those resources so that then at least they have them. Because again, they're just very scared.
Yeah. So if you're watching this and you know somebody that's struggling with depression or anxiety or any other mental illness, checking in, you say checking in with them over time consistently is definitely going to benefit. That's something that they can hold on to, or at least grab onto, and it's like, you know what, there's somebody asking about me.
Because then you're building that rapport too. So then when something really bad happens to them, they feel comfortable to be like, hey, like I really need some like extra support right now. Which has happened because a lot of them just don't have somebody that's checking up on them, and they feel very alone in the situation. And so just being that consistent person in their life is going to like drastically change things for them.
You mentioned fear, and fear goes so many different ways, but fear of being judged, would you feel like that would hold somebody back from reaching out because they feel like they're going to be judged? Do you know anybody that was like that stopped them or anything like that? Yes,
you're looking at her.
Okay. I didn't want to assume.
No, I know. But again, I think that I'm not going to speak for anybody else because I don't know if they felt this way. But I literally felt like people were going to think I was crazy. Like I'm going to tell them like, hey, I really don't like want to be alive anymore. And they're going to be like, oh, you should like go talk to somebody for that. Like,
right.
Because that's happened to me. So I don't know if it's still that way now, if like kids are still going through that, but it was definitely something that stopped me for a very long time. And I think that had I reached out when those feelings first like came around, I might have had a little more support, but instead I kept it all to myself and I bottled it up and I got angry and took it out on everybody else. And who knows what would have really happened if I had reached out sooner. We'll probably never know.
Yeah. But you reached out, so. But
I reached out eventually.
That's important.
Took me a while, but
you got it done.
Exactly.
So, I go from my own personal experience and what I grew up with, and again, my generation. If you mentioned anything about mental illness, they're going to send you to the funny farm, or you're going to be ostracized by your friends, or maybe possibly your family. So that did hold a lot of people back because of the stigma of mental health, which I do believe is getting better as far as being welcomed or okay in today's society more than it was, 30, 40, 50 years ago. But there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. And that's why I believe going into the schools and talking to the youth is beneficial, to let them know that you're not alone. There's other people that feel the way you feel.
Yeah.
And there's help out there for you. You just got to be open to it.
Not to flex or anything, but they love me.
They do love you.
Because I'm close to their age.
That's what
you
you're trying to say.
Ancient,
I'm like, I'm like the grandfather. Jeez.
You kind of are.
Whatever. But yeah. But it's good work. And mental health, it doesn't discriminate.
No.
Doesn't matter how much money you make or where you come from or where you live. It affects everybody in a certain way. I know you do a lot of street outreach too. Do you see that mental health is a major issue besides the substance use disorder out there as well?
Yes.
Out in the streets?
I think that I'm not going to say everybody, almost everybody that I encounter doing outreach has some kind of mental illness, whether it be like something major, like maybe they're schizophrenic or maybe they're bipolar, or sometimes they're just like, hey, like I don't want to be here. Like sometimes they're just depressed and they're anxious. And sometimes they'll straight up tell me, they'll be like, well, I'm out here because like I'm depressed and I'm self-medicating. Sometimes they're like, no, I don't have a mental illness problem. And I'm like, cool, okay. But I think a lot of like the problem, like a lot of people that have substance use, it stems from like an untreated mental illness. And I'm not going to say everybody because obviously it's not everybody, but I do see that a lot
higher
of the
percentage.
time. Yeah. A lot of the time they're just like, yeah, like, and sometimes they weren't mentally, like they didn't have any mental health before starting substances, and then they do because of the substance use. So I really see like all aspects of it. But again, these are adults that have been living this life for so long that they just feel like no matter what I tell them, no matter what resources I give them, they're going to be like, no, like I'm already out here. So I'm just going to kind of keep rocking out. And so then the only thing you can do is just kind of be kind, be nice to them.
How much do you think trauma falls in a part of the mental health issues?
Very,
big part.
Big part.
Yeah.
Very, very big part. And I think that it's not that, to my knowledge at least, it's not talked about enough how much trauma people don't know about. So like, and I'm not talking about like other people, I'm talking about like myself.
Okay.
Right? So like the trauma that I didn't know about played such a big part in my mental health and I didn't even know it. But like deep in the back of my mind, my brain knew, hey, this thing happened to you when you were a kid, but I'm not going to tell you that until you're ready for it. But like I was struggling and there was direct like negative things happening to me because of the fact that my brain knew that, even though I wasn't aware of it yet. So like things that I didn't learn about myself until I was like 17, 18, 19, but like my body knew, like my brain knew. And so I think that that's such a big part. And I don't think that that's talked about a lot. Because again, even though I wasn't aware of it, like I knew subconsciously that it happened. And I'm not just talking about myself. I'm talking about it happens to so many people.
Sure.
And I think that that was a really, really big problem because I think, again, that's where a lot of my depression stemmed from. And I just had no idea. Like, I just didn't know it until one day my brain was like, hey, let me tell you something new about yourself. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
I didn't want that, but I appreciate it.
In your experience, is there any trauma that's worse than somebody else's trauma, or
no?
Trauma's trauma.
Trauma's trauma.
Yeah.
And my trauma is bigger than your trauma because it's mine.
Exactly. Yeah.
But like your trauma is bigger than my trauma because it's yours.
Right.
So like, I think it's so like awful when like I hear people and they're like comparing traumas.
Right.
And I'm like, no, because your trauma to you is the worst thing in the world. And it should be.
Right.
Because it's yours. And I think that that's really important because I think sometimes people will like hear other people talking about their trauma and they're like, well, that didn't happen to me. Like my trauma's not as bad as that. So like, who am I to
speak up or say something?
Speak up or say something or feel as bad as I do when other people are going through things worse than I am.
Right.
But again, it's still trauma. So like, it's still something that you went through that affected you and hurt you and made you feel small. So like, it still needs the same care as any other trauma, like any other thing that happened to any other person.
What's one of the things that blew you away the most going into the schools and in doing outreach as far as the mental health aspect of it? What was it like? Wow, I didn't know that, or wow, I didn't think this was as serious as it was. Kind of, what you saw and you were amazed by it because you didn't know that. What's one of the things, either in the schools or out doing outreach? What was one of the things that hit you the most? Like, dang, I didn't know that.
I think that the biggest thing, and this is something that I think about all the time, and again, didn't realize until I started kind of doing this work, the amount of people that have suffered childhood sexual abuse.
Okay.
Like the amount of people that I have talked to that have disclosed that, like it is way more than my brain could have ever fathomed that like so many people would have gone through. And I feel like that is one of the worst things a person can go through, especially when you don't learn about it until you're an adult. So like when I've had people explain it like feeling like they always knew something was a little off,
Okay.
but they never knew it until their brain told them. So like you're going through this thing in secret for so long and you just don't know what's wrong with you and you feel crazy. And then your body's like, no, like this happened to you. And they're like, oh my God, like everything makes sense.
So it's almost like your mind blocks it out for a little while and you're feeling what you're feeling, but you don't know why you're feeling that.
It's your brain almost like protecting you.
Sure.
Being like, I know that you're not ready to hear this, even though you're like, I know something is wrong. I know something is off, but like, you don't know what it is.
Right.
And so the amount of people that went through childhood sexual abuse and the amount of people that have never disclosed it to anybody and whose like perpetrators never got caught.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people will disclose that and be like, well, I never told anybody. He's still out there or she's still out there.
Right.
And it's so heartbreaking.
Yeah, I agree.
Because what do you do?
Tough one. Yeah.
Especially when these are like adults. Like, what do you do? This was 30, 40 years ago, but it's still taking so much of a toll on them because it's hard. Like that's a hard thing to like heal from and recover from. And you see that, like you see how many people are still in like turmoil over what happened to them when they were 5 and 6 years old.
If somebody had those experiences, what's one of the things that they could do to get help for that? What would you suggest? Or
honestly, I have no idea.
Yeah. Talk to somebody.
You can, but a lot of people won't.
Yeah.
Because they're embarrassed or they think it was their fault. So I would say, yes, talk to somebody if you can. But I think the most important thing is to just not keep it bottled up.
Yeah.
Even if you're writing it down in a journal that nobody else will ever see. Or you're talking about it to yourself in your car by yourself. So like just like getting it out and acknowledging that it happened, even though that's extremely difficult. Like I can't even begin to imagine how difficult that probably is. But I think a lot of the people that I have seen that are like true, like really, really affected by it still many years later have never talked about it, never told anybody, never processed it. And that's their process. Like that's just how they deal with it. And that's okay too. So I wouldn't say that there's a right or wrong way to handle it because it's your way. So like I could handle it completely different than you would handle it.
Sure.
But it works for both of us. So there's really not a good answer, unfortunately. I wish there was.
So, we talked about substance use disorder as well, coinciding with the mental health aspect of it. And, I've been in this field for about a decade now. I know it's been a long time. It's going fast though. And I would say that, it plays, mental health plays a huge part into substance use disorder. I mean, it's a big part of it, of that person numbing themselves or wanting to escape, and feeling the shame and the hurt and, worthlessness and, is it my fault that this happened? Just all those things wrapped up into one, and they just want to escape. So that's one of the things that I've seen, having these conversations with thousands of people, over the 10 years, that I've definitely seen and recognized that, a lot of people will numb themselves, and as far as the mental health aspect of it. Is there anything else you want to add? I mean, to the conversation, or feel anything that we want to talk about that we didn't talk about?
I think we touched on all the important things. But I think the most important thing that we talked about in this entire conversation is that it does get better. Mm-hmm. It gets easier. And I think that losing all the people that I did definitely contributed to my mental health. And I think it's important to know that, like, with grief, you never stop missing them.
Right.
I miss my best friend every day. Every single second of every day, I miss him. I miss my dad every day, even though we have a little bit of beef I haven't worked through yet. But I miss him every day.
Sure.
And so I think that it's really important to just know that, like, you're not crazy. I'm not crazy for missing him 4 years later. That's just how grief is. Like, that's just how it is when you lose somebody. And that's how mental health is, right? Like I said before, there's good days and there's bad days. Some days I wake up and I feel fantastic, and other days I wake up and I feel awful. There's good days and bad days, but it does get better, I think is really important. There's a good side. I am okay. I know people that have struggled with mental illness for their entire lives, and they're okay. So I think that's just, like, if you don't listen to anything else we've said today, it gets better and it gets easier, and you make it through, even though it doesn't feel like you will. Because for a very long time, it never, ever felt like I would be on the other side of it. I never thought I would be 21. If I went back in time and told my 15-year-old self that I'm turning 22 in August, they would have a heart attack. She would literally have a heart attack.
Yeah.
So, like, it gets easier.
The one thing I love that you said is you get out of bed. You get moving. You don't stay in that spot because you change your physical, you change your mental, right? So you just get up and you start moving. And I love that because I feel a lot of people just sit still.
Yeah.
And
they just soak in it.
Yeah.
And it makes it so much worse.
Right.
From personal experience, it makes it so much worse.
Yeah. But I love that. You just get up.
And I've gained so many things in the 4 years that I've decided to just get up out of bed. Right? Like, I have found my best friend. Shout out to Hannah Bartley.
You better do some more shout outs because people are going to be upset.
Listen. And Zach Ferry, he's my best friend too.
Don't forget about Leslie.
And Leslie Palladino. She's going to see this and be like, why'd you say that? But I have found my best friend. I have found my people.
Yeah.
And these are people that I wouldn't have found if I would have stopped getting out of bed. Right. I have found, my little brother. Shout out to Leonidas. He's the love of my life.
Yeah.
Like, he is my light in this world. Both my siblings. Well, I have a lot of them, but both the younger siblings. They are everything to me. Mm-hmm. And I would not have been able to cater to those relationships the way that I have if I would have stopped getting out of bed. I have a job that I love and that I'm going back to school for. Like, I have so many things to look forward to because I just get out of bed.
It's so simple, but so powerful, right?
Yes. I mean, it sounds simple. Is it that simple? No. It's really hard sometimes, but you just do it.
Yeah.
And you just do it, and it gets easier. I don't even think about it anymore.
Yeah. So for everybody that's watching, get out of bed.
When that 7:30 alarm wakes you up, don't snooze it. You don't need 8 more minutes of sleep.
Just get out of bed.
Just get out of bed.
Love that.
Even though I'm kind of a hypocrite because I snoozed my alarm this morning.
Well, you obviously out of your bed.
I got out of bed, so here we are.
Well, I really enjoyed this conversation, so I really wanted to thank you for sharing your experience and some of the things that you are seeing in the school. Hopefully this benefits some people and, we get some positive feedback, which I know we will. So, but
thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you asking me all those very meaningful questions.
My pleasure.
Because I would have had nothing to talk about otherwise.
We found something.
We did.
Absolutely. So thank you.